I'm Patrick Gavin, Politico. It is now time to turn the table with the weekend show host as we do every Friday. This week's topics, the Wall Street Journal and NBC News poll that has very low approval ratings for both the president and Congress. But people are wondering whether or not the budget deal this week means that bipartisanship isn't dead in this town. We'll talk about that and more with CNN's Candy Crowley, Bloomberg TV's Al Hunt, and CBS News' Nancy Cordes. Nancy, maybe some mixed things out of D.C. this week. On the one hand, the budget deal out of the House made some people think that perhaps bipartisanship isn't dead in this town. And yet we also saw this poll this week that said a majority of Americans called this Congress one of the worst ever. Is there anything to read into the budget deal in terms of looking forward to 2014 that perhaps there's going to be a little less acrimony?
I think there's a lot to read into the budget deal. I mean, I don't think that these big bipartisan fights are over. They never will be. But this convinced a lot of members of Congress that leaders can work together to hammer out a deal, even if it's a small deal. You know, Republicans didn't get a lot of what they wanted. They thought that this budget should have slashed spending by a lot more. Democrats were frustrated that it left out renewing unemployment benefits that were set to expire. But it showed that when you got some leaders into a room for a couple of months, they were able to hammer something out. And that's something that they have failed to do time and time again.
Al, you penned a story this week that asked the question, will the budget deal curb Paul Ryan's presidential ambitions? What did you mean, and what is the answer to that question?
Well, I think this budget deal is on balance a good deal. It is somewhat reminiscent of what Churchill said about democracy. It's the worst system of all except for all the others. This is small bore and all that, except what it replaces is the mindless sequester, and it also avoids another government shutdown and shows that at least there's a semblance of bipartisan spirit at work here. So I think Paul Ryan deserves enormous credit. I don't think those activists out in Iowa and South Carolina would agree with that. I think it'll certainly pass the House. A lot of Republicans will vote for it. It's better for them than the alternative, but I'm not sure the activists believe that, and I think Paul Ryan had an uphill climb anyway. He's much more likely to be Ways and Means Chairman than the next GOP presidential nominee.
Well, there's obviously two ways of coming out of this, I think, for Paul Ryan. One is you could view him as a deal maker, somebody who can reach across the aisle, somebody who could compromise. Of course, a lot of people on the far right would criticize him for having done those very things. Which do you think for him is going to be more important in the long run, sort of doing what he did this week or sort of maintaining his street cred with the conservative right?
I think it's the former. I think Paul Ryan is principally a legislator. He's a policy wonk. I doubt he would have run for president under any circumstance. Paul Ryan with young kids spending whatever it is, Patrick, 77 days in Iowa and South Carolina in 2015. They were more attractive options. I think he'd rather work on tax reform and other matters. So I think Paul Ryan sees himself as the next chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, assuming Republicans retain control, which they probably will, and maybe someday Speaker.
Moving over to the Democratic side, we're seeing that President Obama is going to end this year with his highest disapproval ratings that he's had so far. What does he need to do in 2014, do you think, to sort of right that ship? Are there some specific things that we all know and that he knows that need to get addressed for him to sort of get his approval ratings higher?
Sure, the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, needs to work. They need to have more good stories than bad about it and have the numbers to back it up. Because in the end, I think that what's happened is the structure has fallen out from beneath the president's approval ratings. That structure always was based on trust that he was telling the truth, a trust that he could handle the job. And so even when things happened that people didn't approve of, those two things held him up. If you look at the polling now, those two things have fallen, and that's what is, so you see this collapse over, especially since September. So I think in order to build that back, he's got to show success in the one thing that he has staked much of his presidency on, and that's the health care reform.
That's it for this week. You can check out our full interviews online at politico.com/turnthetable. Have a great weekend.